investigation is ongoing. Gene Hackman and his wife, they were found yesterday in their home in New York.
The world was shocked by the devastating news. Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their Santa Fe home. At 95 years old, Hackman had long since stepped away from Hollywood, but his sudden passing sent waves through the industry. Initial reports confirmed no signs of foul play, but investigators remained cautious. The details were unsettling. No forced entry, the front door left unlocked, scattered pills found near Betsy's body. What really happened in those final moments? As the news spread, Hollywood mourned the loss of a legend. Co-stars, directors, and longtime friends shared their grief. But for one man, the loss was deeply personal. Dustin Hoffman, Hackman's closest friend of over 6 decades. Hoffman, devastated, issued a heartfelt statement, honoring a man he had known since the very beginning. The mystery surrounding Hackman's death had only just begun, but one thing was clear. The world had lost a cinematic giant. For Dustin Hoffman, the news was devastating. Gene Hackman wasn't just a colleague, not just another Hollywood legend. He was a brother in every way but blood. Their friendship had spanned more than 60 years, beginning long before either of them found success. Shortly after Hackman's passing was confirmed, Hoffman released a statement. It was short, heartfelt, and full of sorrow. "I don't have the words right now. I just know the world lost one of the greats, and I lost my best friend." The two had shared so much, a lifetime of memories, of struggles and triumphs. They had met as young, hungry actors in New York, both repeatedly told they would never make it in Hollywood. Too unconventional, too ordinary. And yet, they had proved everyone wrong. Hoffman has always been deeply private, but those close to him say the loss has hit him hard. He is struggling with the reality that the man who had been with him through every stage of his life, from their early failures to their greatest successes, was gone. The last time they spoke plays over in his mind. Was there any sign that this was coming? Was there something Hackman had wanted to say? Hoffman has kept the details of their final conversation private, but insiders say he has been replaying those words over and over, searching for something he may have missed. The loss is particularly difficult at this stage in Hoffman's life. At 86, he has now outlived one of the last remaining links to his past. The man who had once been his roommate, his rival, his lifelong friend, is now just a memory. The question of whether Hoffman will attend Hackman's funeral remains uncertain. Those close to him say he is torn. Hackman had always valued his privacy. Would he have wanted a public farewell? Or would he have preferred Hoffman to grieve in his own quiet way? Regardless of whether he attends in person, one thing is certain. Dustin Hoffman will carry the weight of this loss for the rest of his life. Gene Hackman was more than just a friend. He was a part of Hoffman's story, a piece of his history. And now, that chapter has come to an end. The questions began immediately. How did Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, die? The scene inside their Santa Fe home raised more concerns than answers. An unlocked door, scattered pills, and no clear signs of struggle. But now, the medical examiner's report has finally provided insight into their final moments. The official cause of death. Gene Hackman died from complications related to heart failure. At 95, his health had been in quiet decline, though he never spoke publicly about it. His body showed no signs of foul play, no external injuries. His heart had simply given out. But the case became even more tragic when the report revealed that Betsy Arakawa had also passed away from natural causes. toxicology tests confirmed that medication was present in both of their systems, but nothing indicated an overdose or poisoning. Their deaths, while shocking in their timing, were not the result of anything sinister. Still, questions remain. Did Hackman have undiagnosed health issues that contributed to his sudden passing? Had Betsy been struggling with an illness of her own? Or was there something deeper, something unseen, that ultimately led to their deaths? Conspiracy theories began to swirl. Some speculated about an environmental factor, carbon monoxide, an unknown toxin. But investigators ruled that out early on. Others whispered of something more intentional, a suicide pact, a decision made between the two to leave the world together. But there was no evidence to support such claims. No notes, no messages, no sign that either of them had planned for this. The most heartbreaking possibility? One of them passed first, and the other simply couldn't bear the loss. At their age, after decades together, the shock of losing a lifelong partner could have been enough to trigger a fatal event. Some experts suggest that Betsy may have collapsed first, and upon discovering her, Hackman suffered a fatal heart attack from the sheer grief. Others believe it may have happened the other way around. In the end, despite all the speculation, the truth may be much simpler than the theories. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa lived a quiet life together, far from the public eye. They left the world the same way, together. Their deaths remain a tragedy, but for those who knew them best, perhaps it was the way they would have wanted it. Before they were legends, before the awards and the accolades, Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman were just two young actors struggling to survive in New York City. The year was the late 1950s. Hackman and Hoffman were both nobodies, two outsiders trying to break into an industry that had no place for them. They didn't fit the mold. They weren't conventionally handsome. They weren't from Hollywood royalty, and they weren't the type of actors producers were looking for. The industry was brutal. Casting directors told them they lacked the look, the charisma, the star power. They were too ordinary, too rough around the edges, too unconventional. In an era that favored matinee idols, Hackman and Hoffman were written off before they had even begun. But they had something else: raw talent, an unmatched work ethic, and most importantly, each other. At one point, they even lived together. Sharing a tiny, cramped apartment in New York, the two young actors survived on cheap meals, rejection letters, and a shared dream. They pushed each other to improve, to work harder, to prove everyone wrong. If one landed a small role, the other was the first to celebrate. If one was struggling, the other lifted him back up. They weren't just roommates. They were brothers in the struggle. The turning point came when Hackman made the move to California. He was the first to find some traction, and his success gave Hoffman the motivation to keep going. While their careers took separate paths, their friendship never wavered. Years later, when they had both reached the heights of success, neither forgot where they started. They had been counted out, dismissed, told they would never make it. But together, they rewrote the rules of Hollywood. And despite their vastly different careers, despite one becoming a Hollywood leading man and the other retreating into private life, they remained bonded for life. Their friendship wasn't about fame, wasn't about success. It was about two men who had fought side by side from the very beginning, and who, through it all, never forgot where they came from. Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman started in the same place, but their careers took them down very different paths. Both men became Hollywood royalty, each carving out a unique space in the industry. Hoffman became known for his quirky, intellectual performances, bringing a raw vulnerability to roles in The Graduate, Rain Man, and Tootsie. His characters were often outsiders, deeply flawed, yet undeniably human. Hackman, on the other hand, embodied power, authority, and intensity. Whether playing the relentless detective in The French Connection, the cold-blooded sheriff in Unforgiven, or the calculating patriarch in The Royal Tenenbaums, he commanded the screen with a presence few could match. Despite their differences, they always supported each other. Their friendship was built on a foundation of mutual respect, not competition. Though they rarely worked together, they remained in contact, checking in with one another, offering career advice and encouragement. But then, in 2004, everything changed. After decades in the industry, Gene Hackman made a decision few actors of his caliber ever do. He retired. He walked away from Hollywood completely, never looking back. No farewell tour, no last great role, just an exit. For Hoffman, the decision was hard to accept. He had never envisioned a life outside of acting. For him, the stage and the screen were home. But Hackman, he had had enough. Hoffman reportedly tried to talk him out of it, but Hackman was firm. He had always worked for the craft, not the fame. And when the joy of acting no longer outweighed the exhaustion of the industry, he simply left. And yet, despite Hackman's disappearance from the public eye, their friendship endured. Because at the end of the day, it was never about Hollywood. It was about two young actors who had once shared a dream. And no matter where life took them, that bond would never break. When Gene Hackman walked away from Hollywood in 2004, he didn't just stop acting, he disappeared. While other legends stayed in the public eye, giving interviews and making appearances, Hackman chose a different path. He wanted peace, privacy, and a life beyond the industry that had defined him. Dustin Hoffman, however, took the opposite approach. While he slowed down, taking fewer roles, he never truly left the craft. Acting was part of his identity, something he couldn't walk away from. But did Hackman's retirement change their friendship? Those close to them say that despite the physical distance, the bond remained. They may not have seen each other often, but the respect never wavered. Private phone calls, rare meetups, small but meaningful gestures kept them connected. Occasionally, glimpses of Hackman's post-Hollywood life would surface. A blurry photo of him biking through Santa Fe. A rare interview confirming he had no interest in returning to film. He spent his days writing novels, enjoying quiet moments with Betsy Arakawa, and living life on his own terms. The industry moved on without him, but Hackman never looked back. And then there was their final meeting. A moment few knew about, a private conversation between two old friends. No cameras, no reporters, just two men reflecting on lives well lived. What was said remains a mystery, but those who knew them believe it was their way of saying goodbye, not just to each other, but to the era they once ruled. For Hoffman, Hackman's decision to leave it all behind was something he could never fully understand. Could he have done the same? Would he have been able to walk away like his friend did? Perhaps, deep down, he envied Hackman's peace. Or maybe he knew that, for him, the work was never over. Either way, Hackman had made his choice. And even in retirement, his legend only grew. For Dustin Hoffman, the loss of Gene Hackman is more than just the passing of a legendary actor. It is the end of a brotherhood, a connection that had lasted for more than 6 decades. In the days following Hackman's passing, Hoffman was unusually quiet. He had spent a lifetime with words, with performances, with expression. But now, he found himself struggling to articulate his grief. How do you say goodbye to someone who was always there? Hoffman reflected not just on Hackman's career, but on the man behind the screen. He spoke of his dedication, his discipline, his ability to transform into any role with ease. He marveled at Hackman's ability to command a scene, not by demanding attention, but by earning it. Gene never cared about being the biggest star in the room. He just cared about the work. That's what made him so brilliant. Now, the question remains, how will Hoffman honor his closest friend's memory? Some believe he will continue to pay tribute in private, through personal reflection and storytelling. Others think he may sit for interviews, share unheard stories, and keep Hackman's legacy alive in a way that only he can. But whatever Hoffman chooses, one thing is certain: Hackman's work will never fade. His performances are timeless. They will be studied in film schools, dissected by actors looking to understand the craft at its highest level. New generations will continue to discover him, just as they have with Brando, De Niro, and Pacino. But Hoffman carries one regret: something left unsaid. Maybe a phone call he never made. Maybe a conversation they had that ended too soon. Or maybe it's simply the realization that no matter how much time you have, it is never enough. If I had known that was the last time I'd ever speak to him, I would have told him everything. In the end, Hackman was a man who spent his life avoiding the spotlight. He left Hollywood behind, hoping to disappear into the quiet life he built for himself. But even in death, he can't escape it. Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman were more than just movie stars. They were craftsmen, storytellers, and actors who changed Hollywood forever. They didn't fit the mold. They weren't classically handsome leading men, nor did they rely on fame or charisma alone. They built their careers on raw talent, dedication, and a relentless pursuit of authenticity. In an era dominated by larger-than-life figures, they proved that it wasn't about looks. It was about skill. They weren't movie stars in the traditional sense. They were actors first. Every role they played felt lived in, real, layered with emotion. They weren't pretending to be their characters. They became them. But now, that era is disappearing. Hackman is gone. Hoffman is aging. And with them, a generation of actors who came from the theater stage, the struggling artist lifestyle, the relentless pursuit of craft over celebrity is fading into history. They weren't influencers. They weren't cast for their social media following or their marketability. They were cast because they were the best. Where are those actors now? In today's Hollywood, authenticity is harder to find. Acting is still an art form, but the industry has shifted. Charisma often outweighs craft, and the era of actors who disappear into roles, who bring unfiltered humanity to the screen, is becoming rare. There was a time when actors like Hackman and Hoffman, unconventional, raw, deeply human, were the backbone of Hollywood. But with each passing year, that time grows further away. So who is left? With Hackman's passing, the list of Hollywood's true greats is growing shorter. Pacino, De Niro, Nicholson, Eastwood, they remain. But for how long? And what happens when they're gone? Can the next generation carry their legacy forward? There are still great actors. There are still those who study their craft, who push themselves to be better, who take risks and disappear into roles. But the industry is changing. The pressure to be a brand, a personality, a marketable product has shifted the focus away from the kind of actors Hackman and Hoffman represented. But maybe, somewhere, a young actor is watching their films, studying their performances, understanding what made them great. Maybe the next Hackman, the next Hoffman, is out there right now, waiting for their moment, ready to remind the world that talent still matters. Because while the era of Hackman and Hoffman may be coming to an end, their influence will never fade. Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman didn't just star in movies. They changed the way stories were told. Their performances weren't just entertaining, they were transformative, redefining what it meant to truly embody a character. Hackman's intensity was unmatched. He was Popeye Doyle in The French Connection. Ruthless, unpredictable, relentless. His performance wasn't just acting, it was a masterclass in immersion, making audiences believe they were right there with him, chasing criminals through the streets. Then came Unforgiven. A deconstruction of the Western genre, Hackman played Little Bill Daggett with chilling realism, both a villain and a man who believed he was the hero of his own story. It was a role that cemented him as one of the greatest actors of his generation. Meanwhile, Hoffman's range was unparalleled. In The Graduate, he redefined the modern leading man. Not a chiseled action hero, but an awkward, uncertain young man searching for meaning. It was a performance that spoke to an entire generation. Then came Rain Man. His portrayal of Raymond Babbitt was delicate, deeply human, and filled with a level of realism rarely seen in Hollywood. It was a performance that wasn't just memorable, it was groundbreaking. And yet, even though they rarely shared the screen, Hackman and Hoffman's chemistry was undeniable. Their careers ran parallel, each pushing the boundaries of what actors could achieve. They were friends, competitors, and pioneers. Two men who changed cinema in their own ways, yet always seemed to be walking the same path. Their influence didn't end with their final performances. New generations of actors still study them. Directors cite their work as inspiration. Their films continue to be revisited, analyzed, and appreciated by audiences who weren't even alive when they first premiered. Because great acting doesn't fade. Great storytelling doesn't age. And as long as there are movies, as long as there are actors striving to reach the same heights, the legacies of Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman will never be forgotten. Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman weren't just actors, they were storytellers who reshaped the very fabric of cinema. Their performances weren't just watched, they were felt, drawing audiences into the depths of their characters' souls. Hackman's intensity set him apart. He didn't just play Popeye Doyle in The French Connection. He became him, a ruthless, relentless detective willing to cross any line to get his man. His raw, unfiltered energy on screen didn't feel like acting. It felt real, as if Hackman wasn't performing, but living the role. The film's gripping chase scenes, its gritty realism, and Hackman's magnetic presence changed the way crime dramas were made. Then came Unforgiven, a film that rewrote the Western genre. Hackman's portrayal of Little Bill Daggett was chilling, a brutal sheriff who saw himself as the hero, even as he became a tyrant. It was a masterclass in complexity, showing that villains don't see themselves as villains. The role earned him an Academy Award and cemented his place as one of the most fearless actors of his time. Meanwhile, Hoffman's brilliance lay in his versatility. He wasn't the traditional leading man, but he became one of the most captivating actors of his generation. In The Graduate, he redefined Hollywood's idea of a movie star. Playing Benjamin Braddock, awkward, hesitant, lost, he embodied the anxieties of an entire generation. The role wasn't about charm or action, it was about subtlety, about letting the audience feel his uncertainty, his longing, his quiet rebellion. It made him an overnight star. Then came Rain Man, a performance so delicate, so profoundly human, that it redefined portrayals of neurodivergent characters in film. Hoffman's depiction of Raymond Babbitt wasn't exaggerated, wasn't performative. It was deeply authentic. He disappeared into the role, creating a character so real that audiences felt they knew him. It wasn't just a great performance, it was a breakthrough for storytelling. And yet, despite their parallel careers, Hackman and Hoffman rarely shared the screen. But their chemistry was undeniable. Their paths mirrored each other, both outsiders in an industry that initially rejected them, both proving that talent always triumphs over image. They weren't just actors, they were craftsmen. Their impact didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Their influence extends to every new generation of performers, directors, and writers. Young actors study their films, breaking down their choices, their subtle nuances, the way they brought truth to every role. Their greatest performances still feel fresh, still resonate, still inspire, because great acting never fades. Great storytelling never gets old. And as long as there are films to be made, as long as actors strive to reach the same heights, the legacies of Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman will live on.